Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guide. This is the fifth episode of the SFML Roger game series, and in this video we are going to make a system for our enemies to organize them, because in the last video we had an enemy which was only a single enemy for now, but we want obviously to have more enemies, and we want to have a random generation system to actually create the enemies. So yeah, so how are we gonna go about that? So it's actually pretty simple. We can just use a simple array here. So we can obviously use a simple array. When I say array, I mean a vector actually, because that's better. So I'm going to go ahead and add another include statement here. So go ahead and just say hashtag include, and the one you want to include now is vector, which obviously you should know how to use. It's basically a collection of dynamic collection, which you can kind of add more stuff to it, or you can remove stuff from it as well. So we have got our this basically this is basically all we have got as for now. So we are going to this is the type. So we are gonna do this like this. We are going to put it in here in the actual place where you know the actual template where you are supposed to specify the type. Then go ahead and say std colon 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 vector, and if you enter that, then it's going to work, and you can go ahead and say enemies actually here instead of that. Now with that done, let's now obviously this is a vector, you cannot do it like this, but what you can do is you can go ahead and say enemies dot and push underscore back, and once you do that, you can essentially take this like that. You can basically, well, first of all you need to put a rectangle shape here actually, so that yeah, it's like that. So we're going to go ahead and say sf colon colon rectangle shape, and we are going to call the constructor here directly like you would do, and I'm going to cut this here, and I'm going to paste this here. Now that is pretty awesome. So that works, and this is obviously causing a little bit of problem, because obviously you need to remove this now. So obviously you need to kind of do it with the for loop and kind of go over each of the enemies and set the fill color. So this is all we have got for now. So for example, let's go ahead and say enemies 0. So enemies and then in the array just say 0, and let's do it this way, enemies 0. Alright, now that is pretty awesome, but what you need to do is you obviously need to kind of change this to have enemies 0 actually 0 dot move, and in here obviously you need to draw enemies 0. Let's just do that for now. So that is going to essentially do what we want it to do, and it will kind of put all of the it will basically have an array now instead of just a single enemy, but it is going to obviously work the same way as we did before. So let's see. Yeah, you can see it works exactly as we did before, but the difference only here now is that we can actually now add more stuff easily in a better way, and it's not going to cause too much problem. The first step we are going to do is, instead of like doing this and saying enemy 0 dot move, we are going to go ahead and say enemy and we are going to add a for loop here. So we are going to use the range based for loop, and we are going to say for auto, because auto, by the way, putting auto here means that it's going to guess everything automatically, and the and sign means that we want a reference, and we are going to call the it will guess the type automatically depending on the type of the array, and we are going to do this and colon, and we are going to go over our enemies array, and that's pretty awesome. And this is going to do it for each of the enemies, and we are going to basically copy this line and go under the drawing here, and kind of do the same thing here. So just put a tab here, and instead of drawing enemy 0, we are going to just draw our enemy, the one enemy that we have got. This will basically draw all of the enemies present in the array. So this is pretty awesome, but obviously the problem here is that currently we have only got one enemy, so it doesn't change anything in the game. So we need to add a system now for actually adding more enemies. So the way we want it to work is, for example, we want to add a new enemy into the game every, let's say 2 seconds. Maybe that would be a bit too much, or every, let's say 3 seconds. Now or you can actually have a different way of doing that, which is going to be that you are going to destroy an enemy once it goes off the screen, and then you are going to add a new enemy. And an even better way to do it would be to just have a fixed array of let's say 4 enemies, and when they go off the screen, we basically put them directly at the top again, and it would appear that a new enemy is coming, but we would actually not be doing anything. And that would actually allow us to change our vectors into a vector into a array, and we could just use it just as well without putting too much of a memory overhead, and our program would work really efficiently. So for that, what we need to do essentially is we need to find out when an enemy goes off screen, and then when it goes off screen, we need to put it back on screen. So how are we going to do that? So with this enemy movement done, we are going to now go ahead and after moving the enemies, we are going to check the location of the enemy. So we will first of all, let me just go ahead and put this after that, so that we can execute multiple actions in here. So we are going to check the location of each enemy, and if it is for example greater than a particular value, so let's say that it's so our screen is around 600 on the y-axis, and it means that 660 would be when our enemy is completely off screen. So let's actually do 680. So we are going to go ahead and say if and we are going to go ahead and say enemy dot position, and we are going to get the position of the enemy, and that would give us a vector 2, and we are going to go ahead and say get the y value, which means the vertical value of that vector. So enemy dot position dot y, if that is greater than, or actually greater than or equal to we were doing 680, so if that is the case, then we are going to basically put the enemy's position on the y-axis to back to the top, which we'll do in a second. Just put an empty semicolon here. So the problem is that you obviously want to have the enemies to have some vertical variety here and not just be kind of straight, so we obviously need to set that up as well. And the way it would happen is that we would go ahead and say enemy dot set position, and for now we have only one enemy, so let's try to get this to work for the single enemy. So set position, and the position we are going to set is going to be essentially the same that it was in the beginning for now. So let's do that, and like that, and that would actually should make the basic system that we have got working without like only one enemy, but it will work. So as soon as this enemy goes off screen, it comes back on from the top, which is pretty awesome. And now all we need to do is we need to add a little bit of variety to the enemies, which would be pretty awesome, and then we've got pretty much our whole program done. Now as far as doing that is concerned, it's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and actually copy the for loop here and just copy it, and I'm going to kind of paste it here, but obviously we don't want to do any of this in here. Instead we want to do this. So I'm going to press Alt, and if you press the up arrow after pressing Alt, it will basically move them like lines up. You can kind of do that easily. And in here, we instead of doing enemies 1, we want to go ahead and do enemy, so that we do it with all of the enemies which we have got. So like that. Now that is pretty awesome. Now this is essentially going to like do it for each of the enemies, but there might be an even better way of handling that if you have got a vector, which would be to kind of push back the enemies in a much better way, which would be to actually add a normal for loop here by saying for int I is equal to 0, and we can say I is less than the amount of enemies that we want, which let's say is 4 for now, and let's go I plus plus. And what we will do is we will go ahead and say enemy, so we will go ahead and say sf colon colon rectangle shape, and actually let me paste this. Okay, no. So rectangle shape, we are going to create a new rectangle shape like we did earlier called enemy, and what would happen is that this enemy would have a sf colon colon vector 2f, sf colon colon vector 2f, like that, and it would have, for example, 60 by 60 like we decided. So it will have 60 by 60, which is pretty awesome. But what we need to do now is at the end we are going to just go ahead and get our enemies, and we are going to add this enemy to the list of enemies, push back enemies, like that. Okay. Enemies. Alright, so that is awesome. Now obviously this is going not enemies, sorry, enemy. Alright, so this is obviously going to work, but the problem is that all of our enemies are going to be at the same place and moving at the same rate, which would mean that all of the enemies are essentially like the same. But we want the horizontal component of the enemy to vary, and a little bit on the Y component as well. But we want the X component of the enemy to be but we want the enemy to essentially be like the same when moving down. We can move we want the Y component to be same, but you can add a little variation if you want some enemies to start higher, but we cannot actually make it lower than that, or else the enemy will appear in the screen immediately, which will make it look really weird. So we have got this system essentially going pretty well. So let's actually go ahead and do what we wanted with the positioning. So for that we need to kind of decide where the positioning should start and where it would end, and we can add a random number for that. So let's go ahead and add a random number, like add a actual random number to do it, which would you can use the C++ random thing here by going and including random. So if you just search for random, you can see we have got one of library called that, and we can use a random number to generate, for example, between let's say 10 and 10 and 800 minus 30, or 770, 10 and 770, and we can also randomize this a bit, and then that would make the enemy appear at different positions. And what we can do is we could actually copy those lines and we can paste those lines exactly like this here, which will make the enemy have different position each time it restarts. So let's do that now. Now I've already done it using a simple random number generator, which is by creating a random device and then a random uniform in distribution, and then just doing distribute rd and kind of using the modulus operator to kind of divide it by 750. Make sure it is range stays within 750 range, and then we add 10 to it to make sure it stays between 10 and, actually I'm gonna do 760 with this octet, actually not 760, 780, which makes sure that it's between 790 and 10. Which will make it kind of awesome. Now this will actually make everything work, and by the way I've copied this line as well to here, and the problem is that some enemies might be too close together. So for example, right now nothing is being problematic, and you can see it the one of them was nearly out of the screen. The reason is that we kind of need to subtract 60 from it. We need to do 720 because the origin is at the corner, not in the center. So let's try this out now, and now you should see that the enemies work, but it's only 3 appeared. The reason is that 2 of them are kind of on top of each other, and the same thing happens here. Now obviously you can use a better random generator to kind of fix those problems, and there are a couple of other tactics as well. One most important thing would be to add outline. So we are going to go ahead and say enemy dot outline set outline let's set outline color, and we are going to set the outline color to SF color, and you can actually go ahead and say color black, like that, to make sure it's black. Okay, so let's do that, and let's also set the enemy dot set outline thickness to be something like let's say 3. Alright, now let's try this out and see whether that is better or not. So let's see, and you can see it's quite better since it's now white. However, one thing that might be even better would be to make this white, because our background is dark, so black is not that visible. So let's make it white instead, or you can actually change it to yellow or whatever color you like, obviously. But let's try this out now, and yeah, you can see that those are appearing and they have got white background on them. Now obviously this is not like so ideal. You can see that or some of them are too close together, and does not feel like something really good. But we are going to fix this in the future videos. For now we have got our basic system working. In the next video we are going to make the enemies actually do damage to the player. So make sure to stay tuned for that. I will see you in the next one, and make sure to like and subscribe as well, and bye.